Hello everyone, here is the much anticipated video, at least I hope so, introducing the Travel Guide, which is the new application. You will be able to make it available to your travelers, both men and women. So there will be several videos, starting with this introductory one, and then afterwards there'll be videos going into detail about how to configure each part for you. So you can start using this application as soon as possible, since everything is available across all your domains. So how do you get to this login screen, which is the login screen you'll need to access in order to enter the details of an application for a group, but which is also the link you'll need to provide to your travelers so that they can themselves retrieve this application and/or log in. How do you get this link? When you're on the group screen here, you have this button, which has changed its appearance, Travel Access, which has become Travel Access and Guide, and the logic for accessing the Travel Guide has remained the same as for accessing Travel Access. Here you have a Go to Travel Guide button, which will allow you to open the URL that lets you log in. And here you also have a little icon that lets you copy this URL to paste it into your emails. Here you'll be able to set up the template, so we'll look at that. In another video, we'll see how the templates work, with a list of templates that you can create, edit and customize. And then here, the email that will allow you to access a travel guide. And here, the login that will also allow you to access this travel guide. To enter a travel guide, nothing could be easier. Simply click here on Go to Travel Guide. For me, it detects that I'm already logged in, so instead we'll take a login screen. Here, you take the email provided here, paste it, then take the login shown here and paste it as well. And you click on the login button. From there, it logs in to the travel guide available for this group. This travel guide application is shown here in desktop format, but it has been optimized and designed for use on a mobile phone. If you want to simulate a mobile phone on your computer, right-click, I'll show you the steps again. Let's close it here. Right-click, Inspect on Firefox, and here you click on the little phone icon. So now we're simulating a mobile phone screen. If you don't want to bother simulating on a computer, just open this link on Google Chrome, on your mobile phone or on Safari, and from there you'll have access to the same things but directly from your phone. I'm going to close this tab now as it's not the one I'm interested in, so I can show you the details of this group. So this group, for the demonstration, I've chosen a group for you that's taken a short 3-day trip in the La Paz region of Bolivia and Lake Titicaca. Quiet. For this trip, there are 3 travelers. We've got 3 travelers, and we're going to go into the details of what they're going to do. When you are. So, welcome and apologies. Let's get started with the details. Welcome to those seeing this screen for the first time. So here is the home page. This home page will change depending on whether people are using the app before, during or after their trip. So what you're seeing here, in terms of the home page, this is the home page for people logging in before their trip. What's usually interesting for you when you're preparing for a trip? As a DMC, the first thing is to collect the traveler's information. The traveler's info can be filled in here in the Introduce Myself section. And then here, before the trip, we also provide advice to the traveler, how to prepare for the journey, packing tips, and all the exciting things they'll get to see, possibly. And then here we'll really have the section where we go into the details of the trip. That is to say, at the very least, it's designed to be simple, adaptable, and with a strong focus on the contact buttons. In other words, we started from the idea that your travelers, when they open this app, there'll be several moments when they'll want to use it. That's when they're relaxing at home before their trip or during their trip to see what's happening while they're away. And then it's also at times when they need to quickly find some information or get in touch with you fairly quickly. So we're going to take a closer look at the button here. Need help? which actually allows your travelers to quickly find your emergency phone number, if you have one, as well as other ways to contact support. So here, for example, from the icon, you can see it's a chat system. When the traveler clicks on this on their phone, it will open WhatsApp with the WhatsApp contact number you've provided, which opens straight away. Here, it's the same for contacting by email. And here, it opens their email system. Here, for contacting by phone, for a call, it will open the call function on their phone. So you really have to imagine that it's a very practical use, especially designed for mobile phones. Among the other general features we've planned, there's a light mode and a dark mode that will work perfectly throughout the entire application. And you'll be able to configure all the colors you want to use depending on this mode and according to your agency's branding guidelines. What I'm showing you here is a travel journal, let's say, for direct travelers for whom you are identified as the Car Gazelle Voyage Agency and are looking to communicate in this way. This application is also perfectly adaptable for indirect travelers, that is, those who come through a tour operator or a travel agency. Who has purchased your service, and here you'll be able to display the logo of this travel agency and also use the branding guidelines of the travel agency that has entrusted you with this trip. So here, let's imagine we're looking at the trips of a group of direct travelers who are working directly with you. In terms of navigation, as I mentioned on the home page, we have a few buttons that are adapted depending on whether it's before the trip or during the trip. And then after that, we have a small navigation menu here, which is found on the left. The home button is for the home page. Contact. This will open the same thing as if you clicked on the button. Contact. And then we'll go into the details of each section. The first section we're going to look at is the one that allows travelers to fill in their information in terms of name, surname, address, flight, passport, etc. So this is the section we call Traveller, or the page we call Traveller. You can access it either by clicking on Traveller here or by clicking on Introduce Myself. Here, we'll see the page that allows us to fill in our information. You'll notice, by the way, that we've added little loading messages that are themed around travel. They're varied, and I hope you'll find them interesting and original. So here, for example, we have the list of our travellers. So we have two people called Akaji, one person called Pierre Ligo, and one person called Thomas Lubert. We're going to go into the details of a traveller, our traveller, Pierre Ligo. Here, you'll find the logic of your passenger information, which you know either through the info form, the information form, or through Travel Access. For those of you who use Travel Access to enter this information, so it looks like a passenger form, except that, as we'll see in the template editor, you'll be able to configure the actual organization of this form. That is, you'll be able to create sections. Here, you're in the passenger information section. In each section, you will be able to define which field you want to display. If, for example, you don't want to collect email addresses, you can hide this field, and you'll also be able to specify which fields are mandatory. If, for instance, you don't operate international flights, you might not be interested in showing the arrival flight section here, and you can hide it as well. For each template, you'll be able to configure exactly what you want to display in terms of sections and the order of the information. You can also add very special, highly specialized, or very specific sections tailored to your business. I'm thinking of agencies that organise a lot of cycling trips where they need to specify and collect certain details. For example, information about people's height, or at least the desired bike size or helmet size. So all of this will be highly customizable in terms of organisation, what is mandatory and what isn't, as well as in terms of sections and pre-personalisation. And then at the end, you also have fields for accepting the information that has been sent. Your traveller will then simply need to send the information here. So here is the list of your passengers, which can be found in Traveller or in the Introduce Myself section if it's before the trip. The second section that will interest you is, of course, the one about the trip itself, the journey they're about to take. So by default, the trip view you enter, either from the home page by clicking here on See My Trip, is the view of the first day if you are before the trip. Now, if you are during your trip, I'll show you. how your app appears if you are currently on your trip. So here, we've simulated being on the second day of our trip. When you're on the home page for the second day of your trip, you have a dotton that lets you see exactly what's planned for today and where you'll be sleeping tonight and, why not, what's happening tomorrow. On today's agenda, by default, you'll enter day 2. Here, we've simulated being on day 2 of our trip. You can see that this is a presentation and interaction that will be dynamic depending on the date you're on and the dates your travelers are on as well. By default here, when you go into the details of a trip, you arrive at the details for a specific day, since we assume that someone wants to see first what's happening on their day, and then, if they have time, they'll find it easier to check what's happening on the other days of their trip by moving here on this calendar. On the first day, you can see that all the information's there, such as the places visited, the distances travelled, the times, what's included for the day, and so on. All this information comes from the logistics. So if you change any elements in your logistics service, it will automatically and dynamically update what's shown here. In these elements, by default, in terms of presentation, we always start by showing what's included for the day, which is the sum of what's included in the planned services. Here, there's a brief description of what happens during the day. Well, brief or not, it depends on what content you put here. This content comes from the details of the group's program. And then, afterwards, we'll bring in what we call a small card that will present each service plan for that day. So here, under Transport, I have a transport service that's planned. To go from La Paz to Copacabana, I'll be able to go into the details of this transport and see a bit more specifically, okay, what's planned, what time it starts, what time it finishes, which hotel is the departure and arrival point, and then the restrictions that you know about, which you can add depending on the suppliers of the products. All these elements can be displayed or hidden, depending on what you configure in your template. So that's for the view, which allows you to see the details of a day in terms of text and in terms of service descriptions. Next, here you have access to a program view. This program view is a way of presenting your trip, but this time day by day, and in a slightly more visually appealing way. And then in each day you can easily go in and you'll simply find our day view again. In this program view, there's another feature, which is that you can access the page, Accommodation, which shows all the accommodation planned for this trip. For each accommodation, you and your travellers will also clearly see, for example, that here they're staying 2 nights in this hotel. And so you'll find this reflected in the dates. It's the same from the program view with the details of each service. If you have services that aren't hotels, for example, transport, you'll find the details of your transport here. So it's a presentation that's a bit more thematic in terms of services, transport, guides, or excursions. This is just to give you an overall idea of how to navigate this application and how the details of your trips will be presented through it. One feature that we found interesting to offer is what we call here notes. That is to say, beyond simply receiving an app where they can see the details of their trip, we think your travellers will be interested in being able to personalise this travel journal, or at least personalise this application, to add notes to it. For example, at the hotel, they'll be able to write a note here, a note that allows them to personalise their experience. Lovely view from the room. With these notes, they'll be able to add text, attach an image, and also link a voice recording. From there, they'll really be able to personalize things, whether it's notes linked to a service or activity, or notes related to the day itself. For example, if it's their first day and they want to add a note with a photo of their arrival at the airport, they'll be able to do that here and create what we call a day note. So this is what allows them to add personalized notes with photos and images, that sort of thing. So this is the notes section, which is interesting to look at here. These notes, what's especially interesting is that they'll be able to export them. Here, they'll be able to export these notes and at the end of their trip get a PDF version, a presentation format of their notes, and then they can either print it, share it on social media, do pretty much whatever they like with it, or even send it to you. In any case, there really is this idea of personalization of a travel journal through personal notes. One thing I haven't shown you, when you go into the details of a service, you'll have access here to a menu, an action menu. This action menu changes depending on the information provided for each service. So the first action we saw was to write a note. But of course, for a hotel, you have the option to get directions there. You can get directions either by opening Waze on your phone or by opening Google Maps. The Get Directions link is connected to the geographical location of your provider. It can also be linked to meeting points. Here, you'll also be able to give your travelers the option to contact your service providers directly if it's useful or relevant. For example, to let them know they're running late, to report a change, or that sort of thing. In any case, here, they'll be able to access contact information related to your service provider. So the idea is really that while they're traveling, they might think, right, how do I get to the hotel today? I open the app, check the schedule to see where I'm staying tonight, go here, see how to get there, open Google Maps or Parways, and I'm completely independent. If that's the case, I have an appointment with a guide. The guide isn't there when I arrive. If I have a contact note, which isn't the case for this particular guide, but in any case, I'll be able to get their phone number or that of a transporter. I haven't had any more luck with my transporter. But in any case, you'll be able to get the contact numbers for a transporter. For each service, you can also make useful documents available. So here are all the documents you'll be able to link either to a service, a product, or a supplier. And you'll have control via the template over the list of documents you make available. For example, for a hotel, it might be useful to provide the voucher for your hotel directly so that guests can present it immediately upon arrival. And if you want to provide other information, such as a restaurant menu, a map of a hotel, because it's very, very large and people often get lost in it, you'll be able to include here a number of related documents easily accessible for your travelers. You'll also notice that on any screen, from any screen in fact, I'll have this contact button, which is always present and allows your travelers, in case of a problem or issue, to quickly find a way to contact you, the tour operator, or the local agency, or the travel agency. Here's a comprehensive overview of this section. My trip, and then we also looked at the services, and we saw the accommodation, which are mainly found here. In this menu, accommodation and services. Now, we're going to look at the last interesting section, which is called practical information. Here, this is the practical information. You can also access it from the home page in the Prepare My Trip section. The idea behind this section is to bring together here everything you usually provide as advice to travelers before they arrive or while they're arriving. So we'll be able to group together here everything that is advice on food, health tips, advice regarding visas, anything to do with shopping, all that sort of thing. So both general advice and also tips that are linked to a geographical logic. Now, to explain this idea of advice to you, a geographical logic simply means that you'll be able to automatically display here, for example, the tips and restaurants for the city of La Paz, and they'll only appear if your trip passes through La Paz. You no longer have to manage this logic through templates or models like, because they're passing through La Paz, I'll show them the note about restaurants in La Paz. Because they're passing through here and here, just to give you an idea. The application has detected that it's a trip to Bolivia and you had already planned it. In fact, a section with advice on films to watch when traveling in Bolivia, or films that might be of interest. Because your trip's taken place in Bolivia automatically, this information note appeared because it's actually linked to the country, Bolivia. And then, because it goes through the Lake Titicaca region, which is a high altitude area, this information note related to altitude will appear, and will give them advice on how to acclimatize to the altitude, and what are the early warning signs of possible problems at altitude. And if my trip hadn't gone through a high altitude region, this note wouldn't have appeared. And then, because it goes through La Paz, I'll give them restaurant recommendations related to La Paz. So this is really the section that will allow you to play around with information in a fairly dynamic way and very well suited to the trip you're offering for anything to do with travel advice quite simply. On the app, they'll have a little preferences menu, which at the moment just lets them select the display language of the app. Today, we're going to allow the use of the different languages you've set up in your tool to display the details of this app. That's a first overview of what we want to achieve in terms of making information available. I'll show you quickly. I'll quickly show you another template which is easy to configure just to demonstrate that it's highly customizable depending on your logo and your colors. So here, for example, we can imagine if it's a trip organized for Terra Gaia Agency, which is a fictional tour operator in Europe, and who has purchased your services, you'll be able to present exactly the same information, but by customizing it in terms of design and color choices according to what the agency has provided you. But behind all these elements, the technology and the information, it really does come from your own tour operator. That's it for the general presentation, and we'll move on to a second video on how to set all this up.